In this video, we're going to learn how to convert a color image to black and white in Lightroom. I've got an image here that has two very distinct colors, red and green. I think there's a little bit of magenta in the red, and there's some yellows and some other things that are happening in the image too, but mostly you see a red apple and a green leafy background, right? So this will show us the power of what we can do in Lightroom with conversion to black and white. Now you may know about saturation, and if I go to the saturation slider, we know this is the intensity of all color, and one might be tempted to simply just drag saturation down, because as we do, we get weaker and weaker color until eventually we get to a completely black and white image. But that's a very poor way of converting to black and white, because we simply end up with gray on gray, and we can't use the color of the red apple and the green background to help push the separation between those two subjects. So the apple kind of gets lost a little bit in the background. We have a lot of gray tones, very little kind of punchier contrast, black and white separation between those things. So I'm going to set the saturation back to where it was, and instead I'm going to go up to black and white. But before I do, because I want to preserve my color version of this image, I'm going to go to the photo menu and choose Create Virtual Copy. By creating a virtual copy, we're going to have a second version of this picture. It will show up in our timeline there, and you'll see that it has a little upturned corner to indicate that it's a copy. It'll also say copy 1 or copy 2, something like that, next to that image. A virtual copy is simply a second reference file, a second XMP file, for the same raw file underneath. You never actually change the raw file, but you can have several different XMP files that have different adjustments that you prefer, different versions of that image. So we've created this virtual copy, and now I'm going to go to the upper part of our right-hand panel and click on black and white as the treatment for this image. And we see now that we have a black and white image. It looks very similar to if I simply straight desaturated it. But what I will now do is go down below basic and below tone curve, we have a black and white section. If you're in color treatment, this is HSL color panel or section, but now it is the black and white section. And you have these different color sliders. And it may seem odd to have color sliders with a black and white image, but this is determining how does one particular color get translated into black and white. Does it come in as a lighter color, a lighter shade of gray, or a darker shade of gray? Now we have red and green in this image. If I go up with the red, you see my red apple gets lighter. If I go down with the red, you see the red apple gets darker. If we adjust the green, we can make the greens lighter or the greens darker. So what do we want to do? We want to separate the apple from the background. I think I want to make one of them darker, one of them lighter. Let's try making the apple lighter first. So I'm going to go up on red. Now that apple probably has a little bit of magenta, so I'm also going to go up on magenta, maybe up a little bit on orange. And then the background is mostly greens and yellows and aquas, so I'm going to bring green down, but I'm also going to bring yellow down a little bit and aqua down a little bit. And now we've got kind of a light apple against a dark background. Much better separation. We could push that a little bit further by now going back to our basic section and maybe adding a little extra clarity, a little texture, maybe pushing the whites up a little bit. I find that black and white images can handle a lot more contrast, brighter highlights and darker, richer shadows than a color image can handle. So I might bring the blacks down, bring the whites up a little bit. Now I've got a much punchier image than I had before. But this is not the only interpretation I can do with this image. So let's make a second virtual copy. And this one, I'm going to go back to my original. I'm going to go to the photo menu, create virtual copy. Now I have another copy of the same image. This one I will also convert to black and white, but in this case, I'm going to go to the black and white mix, and what if, see, I think the apple is actually already a little darker than the background, not by much, but why don't I use that to my advantage and push that, and we'll go down on red, down on magenta. Now that apple's getting darker versus its background. I'm going to do a little bit down with orange, maybe a tiny bit down with purple, but I'm also now going to go up with green, up a tiny bit with yellow, up a little bit with aqua, and now I have a dark apple against a light background. just as I did on the last one, I'm going to return to the basic section now and push my tonal adjustments a little further, a little added clarity and texture. And most of all here, I'm going to push up whites a bit to get a little bit more brightness out of my brightest highlights. Maybe down just a touch on blacks. And so now I have these two different interpretations, which I'm now going to show you. If I select the two of them and go to the compare view in my library module, which I did with the N key, by the way. If you have two images or more and you hit N, you will see them being compared. And there are two different interpretations of the same image. I could not do that if I simply desaturated the image. I could not do that if I had shot that image in a black and white mode in the camera. But here I can have two different interpretations. Now from here, let's go back to the develop module. And I want to show you also, if I go to just this image, if I go to the YY view, that's down in this area here. YY is comparing before and after. I can also look at my image side by side here and see before when it was color, and here it now is in the black and white mode. Let's use that to our advantage when we do this next image here of the rainbow pride flag. Now in this case, this image already has some edits done, so it's really showing us all the way back to the very original image. I'm going to take this one state and throw it here. So now we really have an apples to apples comparison. And actually I'm going to make a virtual copy of this picture. So photo menu, create virtual copy. Now we're working on the copy. I like to do that so that I still have my color version of the image, and the color version won't be affected by the different basic adjustments that I do to the tonal range later. So here's my color version. I'm now going to switch this to black and white treatment. And again, we got kind of just a variation of grays, and I don't think it represents as well the variation of color that I see in that flag. So I want this, even though it's black and white, I still want it to kind of feel more like a rainbow with a graduation of tone. So when I go to my black and white mix, I still think the yellow stripe is the lightest stripe. I might move that up a little bit just to push that a bit more. I'd say the orange is the next lightest stripe, but it looks probably 2 shades darker than the yellow stripe now. Let's make it just 1 shade darker by going up a little bit brighter on the orange. Same thing with the green. The green is a huge drop in value from the yellow. I don't want it to feel that different, so I'm going to bring up green and watch it and see where do I feel that's about right. Maybe there's more aqua in that shade. Yes, there is. There's more aqua in that shade than I realized. So by bringing up aqua, that helped that stripe there. And then we get to the blue one. To me, the blue looks like the darkest of all of these stripes. But at the moment, it's very equal with the green. So I'm going to take blue and bring blue down. And now that's a good separation from the green one. And the purple, oddly enough, it's a little bit lighter than blue. So I'm going to push that by bringing the purple up. And maybe as I do, I want to bring the blue down even more. And so there I have a really nice variety of tones between these different previously colors of that flag. I didn't really talk about the red, but there's still a red stripe on the far left of that flag, and I can decide where I want to put the red. So one thing I really love in this compare view is that I can refer back to the original colors of the image simultaneously on my screen as I edit the black and white one. So if I'm not sure what something is color-wise, I can refer to that and adjust it. Let me show you a little bit further. I'm going to go to a different image here, and in this case, let's first make it a virtual copy. Photo menu, virtual copy. Now here, there's a big difference in these images in terms of their color and value. I think there's no doubt the purple color is the darker value. And when I initially switch this into black and white, I think I've got a pretty good separation between these two, but it doesn't mean that I can't push that a little further. So I can go to my black and white adjustment, and being that the purple is the darker side, let's first try taking purple down. Yellow is the other side. Now here's something I think is kind of interesting with this image. That yellow tone is next to this white frame of the doorway. What if I want to keep that separation more? Maybe in this case I don't want to push don't want to push yellow to be much brighter. Maybe I actually make it just a little darker so that I see more separation between this value and the value of the white door frame. I might take that purple and push it even more, just so that there's still a very deliberate difference between those two. As always, I would return to my basic tonal section and push the edit just a little bit further in terms of contrast. In this case, I'm just going to push the whites up a little bit more, and otherwise I think it's really pretty solid. Okay, so I'm ready to move on from that, but that just kind of pushed it. Before I leave it though, let me just say that if I happen to want to reverse those tones, it's not impossible. If I took purples and brought them way, way, way up, and I brought yellows way, way, way down, I can actually reverse left and right in terms of light and dark in this image. There's a limitation. I can't get the purple to be completely white. Maybe if I brought up magenta a little bit. I don't know if there's any blue. It's mostly straight up purple. But I can certainly bring the yellow way, way down. I'm going to go back to where it had been. And the last image I'm going to show you here, and for this one I'll just go into my single develop module view. I've got a light blue house on the left with maybe just a hint of a purple tone in it. I've got a house on the right that is much more in the aqua range, and I've got this yellow accent color at the bottom and on the windowsills. Here again, I'm going to first go to Photo menu and create virtual copy. Now I'm going to switch this to the black and white mode. And where do we want these colors to go? I'm going to start first with this aqua. And I'm going to go to the aqua slider, and I'm going to bring that down a little bit. That's already the slightly darker house. Now if I bring it up, I can make it match the house on the left. That kind of loses the point of the fact that these houses were painted different colors. So I'm going to bring that down. Do I want to bring it way down? Maybe. Maybe somewhere around there. Already the house on the left has a significantly different tone. That tone would be much more in the blue range. So you can see as I adjust the blue, I'm affecting that. And a little bit I'm affecting the house on the right. I might bring that down a little bit. And now I've got the yellow, and I'm going to take the yellow and move it up and get a little bit of brighter tone in there. Maybe not quite as bright as the white parts of that house around the window frame, but certainly brighter. And as always, and I can't emphasize this enough, I'm going to return to my basic section and push the edit a little bit in terms of tonal range. I think it's a mistake to think that our switch to black and white is our final step. I always return to the basic tonal range to further adjust those tones to get the maximum kind of contrast range, tonal range out of that image. All right, and that's converting to black and white in Lightroom.